December 12th, 1825. The Bank of England, London. A 61-year-old Bank of England director named Jeremiah Harman is authorizing emergency credit facilities at a pace his institution has never attempted before. The queue outside his window is not depositors, it is banks. 60 of them will fail before the month is out. Another 40 will follow in January. The crisis arrived with a specific arithmetic. British investors had spent 3 years pouring capital into newly independent Latin American governments: Peru, Colombia, Mexico, Chile, Brazil, Guatemala. Bonds, mining company shares, infrastructure schemes, every variety of speculative instrument that optimistic British capital could devise to participate in the growth story of the newly liberated Western Hemisphere. The growth story was real. The debt capacity of newly formed governments with no credit history, no institutional framework, and economies still reorganizing after decades of colonial rule was not real, or at least was not real at the scale British investors had priced. By late 1825, the repayments were not arriving. The bonds were worthless. The mining company shares were worthless. The infrastructure schemes were dreams. And every bank that had lent to the investors who had lent to Latin America was now discovering that its assets were worth a fraction of what its liabilities required. Harman authorizes the credit. The Bank of England lends freely. The panic is contained barely. 6 months later, Britain enters a depression that lasts until 1832. Britain in 2025 is not lending to Latin American governments. It is doing something structurally more dangerous. It is borrowing from the world while its own productive capacity contracts at a pace and a scale that the 1825 arithmetic recognized immediately. Stay with me. Meanwhile, 93% of users who watch our videos haven't subscribed. So, while you subscribe below, let's move on to the video. To understand the 1825 crisis, you need to understand what actually caused it beyond the Latin American bond defaults. The Latin American bonds were the trigger. They were not the disease. The disease was a specific imbalance that had been building since 1815. Britain had emerged from the Napoleonic Wars as the dominant industrial economy on Earth. Its factories, its trading networks, its financial markets were generating enormous surpluses. Those surpluses needed somewhere to go. Domestic investment opportunities, while real, could not absorb the volume of capital that industrial Britain was generating. The result was a capital export boom. British savings flowed outward, to Latin America, to British canal and railway schemes, to any venture that promised returns above what the saturated domestic market could offer. The flow was rational at the individual level. Each investment decision looked reasonable based on the information available. The aggregate was irrational. Too much capital chasing too few genuine investment opportunities. Too many bonds issued against revenue streams that did not yet exist. Too much optimism about how quickly newly independent governments could develop the institutional capacity to service external debt. When the optimism proved wrong, when the revenue streams failed to materialize, when the governments proved unable to service the bonds, the capital that had flowed outward stopped returning. British banks that had funded the investors now faced asset shortfalls. The Bank of England's emergency lending was the only mechanism that prevented complete systemic failure. The 1832 depression that followed was the economy's honest accounting of what the capital misallocation had actually cost. 7 years of below-trend growth, industrial output contracting, employment falling. The adjustment was painful, real, and inescapable, once the misallocation scale became undeniable. Now here is Britain in 2025, and the parallel is not in the specific investments. It is in the specific arithmetic of what happens when an economy's financial position exceeds its productive capacity to sustain it. Britain's current account deficit stands at approximately 3.5 to 4% of GDP. This measures the gap between what Britain produces and sells to the world versus what it imports and consumes. Britain has been running this deficit continuously for over 2 decades. Every year, Britain consumes more than it produces. Every year, the difference is financed by foreign capital, overseas investors buying British assets, foreign governments holding sterling, international institutions providing credit. This is the reverse of the 1825 imbalance. In 1825, Britain was exporting capital it had in surplus. In 2025, Britain is importing capital it needs to cover a productive deficit. The direction is opposite. The structural vulnerability is equivalent. Both positions are sustainable only as long as the counterparty, in 1825, the Latin American borrowers, in 2025, the foreign investors financing the British deficit, maintains confidence in the arrangement. Britain's debt-to-GDP has risen from approximately 35% in 2007 to roughly 100% today. Annual debt interest payments approach $100 billion. The structural fiscal deficit, the gap between spending and revenue in normal economic conditions, is approximately 5 to 6% of GDP. Now, here's the critical part. The 1825 crisis broke when the Latin American borrowers could no longer service the debt that British investors had provided. The counterparty failed, The confidence collapsed. The capital stopped returning. The 2025 equivalent question is, what happens when the foreign investors financing Britain's current account deficit and holding its gilts decide that the arithmetic no longer justifies their confidence? The 2022 mini-budget provided a preview. In 4 days, British gilts experienced their fastest yield spike in decades. The pound fell to its lowest level against the dollar since 1985. The Bank of England was forced to intervene to prevent pension fund failures. The government that had presented the mini-budget was gone within weeks. That was the market's 4-day answer to 4 days of fiscal announcements it judged unsustainable. It was not the full 1825 reckoning. It was the warning that the reckoning is available. Here is the specific arithmetic that the title calls the breaking point. The 1825 crisis had a specific mathematical threshold. When the cost of servicing Latin American debt exceeded the revenue those governments could generate, the debt was unserviceable. The threshold was reached not through bad faith, but through genuine incapacity. Britain's equivalent threshold in 2025 has a similar structure. Annual debt interest payments of approximately $100 billion, structural deficit of approximately 5 to 6% of GDP, requiring approximately $130 billion in additional borrowing annually. Total annual borrowing requirement of roughly $220 billion. That borrowing requirement must be financed by a gilt market that has already demonstrated, in September 2022, its willingness to reprice British sovereign risk rapidly and severely. The financial resilience required to absorb that repricing, the reserves, the spare fiscal capacity, the institutional credibility, has been substantially consumed since 2007. Britain in 1825 reached a breaking point when the asset base underlying its foreign lending proved insufficient to support the liability structure built on top of it. Britain in 2025 is approaching a breaking point when the productive base underlying its foreign borrowing may prove insufficient to support the liability structure built on top of it. The arithmetic of bankruptcy is the same in both directions. Liabilities exceeding the assets, or productive capacity that service them. The direction of the capital flow changed between 1825 and 2025. The mathematical relationship between capacity and obligation did not. Here is what the 1825 depression actually felt like for British workers and businesses, because this is the dimension that connects the historical episode to 2025's lived experience. The depression that followed the 1825 crisis was not a dramatic single collapse. It was a 7-year period of below-trend performance. Industrial output was lower than it should have been. Employment was lower, wages were lower, investment was lower. The people who lived through it did not experience it as a historical event. They experienced it as persistent difficulty, as businesses that could not get credit, as wages that would not rise, as employment that was always slightly harder to find than it should have been. This is what a debt-driven capital misallocation costs when it finally corrects. Not a single day of visible disaster. 7 years of grinding below potential performance. The economic output that would have been produced if the capital had been allocated correctly, that output was simply not there. The misallocation's ghost haunted the economy's performance for most of a decade. Britain's post-2007 performance looks structurally similar. Productivity growth below the OECD average for 15 years. Real wages lower in 2025 than in 2007 in many sectors. Public services under sustained financial pressure despite continuous government spending. The economy is functioning. It is functioning below what its productive capacity should, by historical standards, allow. This is not the 1825 crisis fully expressed. It may be the 1825 crisis still working through the system. The 7-year depression equivalent still running, now 18 years in, because the capital misallocation that preceded 2007 was larger and more structural than the Latin American bond bubble of the 1820s. This channel exists to find the arithmetic before the Bank of England has to authorize the emergency credit. Jeremiah Harman authorized extraordinary credit facilities in December 1825 because the alternative was complete systemic failure. The credit worked. The panic was contained. The depression that followed was not averted. It was delayed by a few months and made slightly less catastrophic at the acute phase. The Bank of England's capacity to repeat Harman's maneuver in 2025 exists. It demonstrated it in September 2022 with the gilt market intervention. But the 2022 intervention cost institutional credibility and market confidence that cannot be recovered simply by making the intervention available again. Each use of emergency institutional capacity reduces the store of credibility available for the next emergency. Harman had a full store of Bank of England credibility in 1825. The institution was 131 years old and had never faced a comparable crisis. The Bank of England's 2025 store of credibility has been drawn down by the 2022 intervention, by quantitative easing, by the various post-2008 emergency facilities. The arithmetic of 1825 and the arithmetic of 2025 point in the same direction. When the liability structure exceeds what the productive or asset base can honestly service, the adjustment comes. Harman's credit facilities determined its timing. They did not change its destination. Subscribe if you want to keep watching the arithmetic. And I want your argument in the comments. In 1825, the Bank of England's emergency credit delayed the depression by months but did not prevent it. The adjustment was inescapable because the capital misallocation was real. In 2025, the Bank of England has already used emergency credit once in the current cycle, in September 2022. If the adjustment that 2022's mini-budget previewed has been delayed rather than prevented, does the Bank of England's next use of emergency credit produce the same outcome Harman's did, a managed delay followed by an unavoidable correction? Drop your argument below. The clearest one gets pinned.